The art of impenetrable presence. Mastering unreadability in a transparent world power isn't always seized through overt acts of aggression or displays of overwhelming force. Often it's subtly acquired, even stolen, in the quiet spaces between words, in a fleeting glance, a moment of hesitation, or a pause held just a fraction too long. Niccolò Machiavelli, the astute observer of human nature and political maneuverings, understood this long before the discipline of psychology ever gave a name to its intricate mechanisms. He recognized a profound truth: most people unwittingly betray themselves, not through grand deliberate actions, but through the tiniest, almost imperceptible leaks in their emotional facade. These are the subtle giveaways, the micro expressions, the nuanced shifts in tone that reveal inner turmoil, insecurity, or a desperate yearning for something. And once you leak, once that vulnerability is exposed, you inevitably lose a measure of control. The insidious part is that you often don't even realize you're bleeding these emotional signals. The emotions that expose you aren't the loud, dramatic ones we typically associate with human vulnerability. Not overwhelming happiness, not explosive anger, not paralyzing fear. Instead, they are far smaller, infinitely quieter, slipping out almost imperceptibly in casual words, fleeting micro expressions, or those slightly delayed pauses in conversation. These are the very things that render you predictable, making you an open book, easily read, and therefore tragically easily manipulated. Machiavelli, with his characteristic strategic genius, never bothered to hide his surface. Instead, he meticulously buried his core. He understood that once someone truly comprehends what truly shakes you, what drives your deepest desires or insecurities, they effectively own you. This ownership isn't exerted through brute force, but through a profound and unsettling insight into your inner workings. If your aspiration is to cultivate a truly impenetrable mind, one that no one can effortlessly play, bend, or ultimately break, then you must diligently work to erase three specific emotions from your visible self. These are the emotional telltales that, when displayed, grant others an unwarranted peek into your vulnerabilities. The first leak, the peril of eagerness. The first emotion you must meticulously excise from your observable behavior is eagerness. Now let's be precise here. Eagerness is not the same as genuine enthusiasm. It's not the healthy drive of motivation or a passionate interest in a subject. Instead, eagerness is that desperate, almost frantic signal that you want something. It could be attention validation, approval, an elevated status, or a crucial opportunity, something you desire far more intensely than you're willing to admit. And in that very signal, in that palpable yearning, lies your profound weakness. The moment you appear visibly eager, you inadvertently create a power imbalance. You are in essence broadcasting to the other person, "You possess something I desperately want or need." And that immediate confession of desire hands them a powerful lever, giving them undeniable leverage over you. This dynamic manifests itself in countless scenarios across your life, in high stakes job interviews, where you lean too far forward, in the delicate dance of relationships, where you agree too quickly to requests, in critical negotiations, where you answer before the other party has even finished their question, or even in casual conversations, where you offer excessive praise. You might find yourself subtly or not so subtly trying to prove your worthiness, attempting to convince others that you are the one they should choose, And in doing so, Machiavelli would argue you inadvertently prove precisely the opposite. You prove you are not the one to choose because your eagerness exposes your insecurity. Machiavelli, ever the realist, would assert that the one who chases is already beneath the one who withholds. Eagerness makes you incredibly readable, an open book for anyone to skim. And readability, ironically, is the swift killer of mystery. Mystery, he understood, constitutes at least half of true power. When you stride into a room, your eyes gleaming with undisguised eagerness, people instinctively, perhaps even subconsciously, devalue you. They may not articulate it, they may not even consciously recognize the feeling, but they sense it deep within themselves. Your perceived need, your overt desire creates their inherent confidence. Conversely, your profound detachment, your quiet composure generates a palpable uncertainty in them. And it is precisely in that uncertainty that the seeds of control begin to sprout. To effectively neutralize eagerness, you must rigorously train yourself to slow down. Not your thoughts, those can race at 1,000 miles an hour, but your outward expression of them. Cultivate the habit of speaking only after a deliberate pause. Nod sparingly, letting your agreement be a measured, intentional gesture, not an automatic reflex. Allow silence to gracefully fill the spaces where others compulsively rush to affirm their presence or agreement. Give the distinct impression that you are perpetually observing, carefully calculating, rather than desperately attempting to prove your worth. Because in every social or professional environment, the individual who appears least eager is almost always perceived as the most in control, not because they inherently possess more, but because their visible demeanor suggests they need less. Now take a moment to honestly reflect on how often you've inadvertently revealed this emotional tell. Think of texts sent too quickly, those desperate double sent messages when someone didn't reply instantly, compliments that feel more like thinly veiled begging than genuine appreciation, showing up significantly too early for appointments, or saying yes too fast to requests. That's not confidence, that's raw exposure. And Machiavelli, in his timeless wisdom, would sternly warn you expose absolutely nothing unless that exposure is unequivocally to your advantage. The second leak, the treachery of conflicted admiration. The second emotion is arguably even more dangerous than eagerness, primarily because it cunningly wears the deceptive mask of authenticity, making it a subtle yet potent trap. This is conflicted admiration. It's that subtle, almost imperceptible look you give someone when you genuinely respect their achievements or qualities, but simultaneously harbor a deep seated resentment that they possess what you covertly desire. It manifests itself in various insidious ways as backhanded praise that subtly undermines while seemingly commending, as complimenting someone's success while implicitly comparing yourself to them, or as aligning yourself with individuals who are slightly more successful than you, yet never fully genuinely accepting their elevated position. The very instant someone detects this emotional tension in you, this toxic blend of respect and resentment, two critical things immediately happen. Firstly, they instinctively realize that you covertly desire their position, their success, their status. Secondly, and perhaps more critically, they recognize that you will never truly, unequivocally support them. And from that precise moment forward, you are irrevocably perceived not as a valuable ally or a supportive colleague, but as a veiled threat concealed behind a forced, fake smile. This emotion is pure psychological poison because it is deeply rooted in your own insecurity, yet it attempts to present itself under the guise of admiration. Even the most casual observer, someone not particularly attuned to emotional nuances, can sense the underlying tension. Your eyes might convey a superficial respect, but your tone, your posture, or a micro expression subtly betrays a different, darker sentiment. That's all it takes to lose respect and trust. Machiavelli, ever vigilant against any form of weakness in his court, would have ruthlessly annihilated this habit from anyone serving him. He understood a profound truth. To admire what you envy is to announce your submission to it, yet simultaneously to resist or overtly resent that which you envy is to starkly reveal your own internal fracture, your own psychological battle. True power, he posited, demands an uncompromising clarity. You either admire fully with absolute grace and sincerity, or you don't admire at all. Never both simultaneously. This in between state, this emotional limbo of respect and resentment, is precisely how you allow people to peer directly into your internal struggle. And once they do, you are no longer impenetrable. You become fragile, transparent as glass. To effectively kill this insidious emotion, you must meticulously study your comparisons. Who are the people you are secretly watching, perhaps even obsessing over? Who do you overtly praise but consistently feel a palpable tension around who makes you feel small or inadequate, even if you outwardly pretend otherwise? That's the insidious feeling you must strive to erase, not because the feeling itself is inherently bad or evil, but because its outward manifestation is visibly detectable. And visibility in this context is vulnerability. The third leak, the fatal flaw of anticipatory doubt. There's a third emotion, even more subtly hidden, even more dangerously common, and tragically, almost everyone reveals it without even realizing it. Machiavelli would have considered this the most fatal of all emotional leaks, anticipatory doubt. This is distinct from fear. Fear is a reactive emotion. It arises after a threat has presented itself. But anticipatory doubt, that's the insidious emotion that subtly leaks out before anything negative has even occurred. It's the almost imperceptible drop in your voice just before you ask a crucial question. It's the slight momentary hesitation before you commit to a decision. It's the small self deprecating disclaimer you instinctively utter before you speak your mind. I might be wrong, but, or this probably won't work, but I'll try. You don't consciously notice you're doing it, but everyone else does, especially those who are looking for an opening, those who want to challenge your authority or position. Anticipatory doubt is the telltale emotion of someone who is already subconsciously prepared for failure. Not publicly, not overtly, but deep within their internal landscape. And this internal pre failure manifests in countless subtle ways in your posture, in your overall energy, in the way you look at someone when you tentatively offer an idea as if you're implicitly asking for permission or validation. It shows in the insidious way you pre reject yourself before others even get the chance to. Machiavelli would have viewed this as a form of psychological suicide, not because it inherently makes you weak, but because it invites attack. It is a silent broadcast to everyone around you, essentially stating, I don't fully believe in myself or my capabilities. So if you're looking for an opportunity to challenge me, now's your chance. And whether it's in the cutthroat world of politics, The subtle dynamics of power, the complexities of relationships, or even the simple interactions of daily life, that subtle signal is often enough to trigger predators, to provoke a test of your resolve. True confidence, as Machiavelli understood, isn't about always being right or having all the answers. It's about an unwavering internal conviction about never flinching under pressure. And when your presence begins to betray signs of internal doubt, you instinctively trigger an instinct in others to test your authority. This isn't always done maliciously. Sometimes it's a subconscious reaction to perceived weakness. But the outcome is consistently the same: you lose control. This is precisely why individuals who speak slower, who allow for longer deliberate pauses, and who project an unshakable conviction, even if they aren't demonstrably more intelligent or knowledgeable, are almost always perceived as leaders. It's not because they possess inherently better answers, but because they reveal far less internal conflict. That's what people instinctively respond to and gravitate towards. To effectively eliminate anticipatory doubt, you have to fundamentally stop narrating your insecurities. You must ruthlessly kill the ingrained reflex that seeks external approval before you take action. When you have a thought state, it directly and clearly. When you feel uncertain, act with an unwavering calm anyway. When someone questions, you don't rush to defend yourself or over explain. Instead, let them sit in the discomfort of your silence. And power isn't found in a torrent of answers. It's found in the profound lack of anxiety radiating from behind them, the deeper truth containing not killing emotion. And here lies the even deeper truth that Machiavelli profoundly understood: when you do feel eagerness or conflicted admiration or anticipatory doubt, that's simply being human. You cannot always magically stop the emotion from arising within you, but you absolutely can stop it from leaking out, from betraying your inner state to the world. That he taught is the true game. The goal isn't to become emotionless, a cold robot. The goal is to become unreadable, because people are not genuine mind readers. They are, however, remarkably adept body readers and energy readers. They meticulously watch how you breathe, how long you pause, how your tone subtly changes when a subject shifts, how often you utter phrases like, "I don't know," or how you react or don't react when someone challenges you. Every tiny shift, every minute deviation from a consistent baseline sends a powerful message about how breakable you truly are. Your paramount job, if you aspire to cultivate an impenetrable mind, is to immediately cease broadcasting that code, shut off the signal, mute the leak. This isn't achieved through brute force or a fake aggressive toughness, but through a deliberate, measured, and strategic presence. Every single word you utter must feel chosen, intentional, purposeful. Every expression on your face must be a conscious choice, not an involuntary reflex. Every silence you maintain must be a statement in itself, pregnant with meaning. Because the more unpredictable you become in your emotional displays, the more powerful you inherently feel. The less others know about what truly affects you, the more they are forced to guess, to speculate, to expend mental energy trying to decode you. And guessing, Machiavelli knew, is profoundly exhausting. That becomes your distinct edge. You transform into the person no one can quite read, no one can quite pin down, and therefore, crucially, no one can confidently control. The transformation respect mystery and dominance. Here's what happens next. The profound transformation that occurs once these three emotional leaks, eagerness, conflicted admiration, and anticipatory doubt, are meticulously erased from your visible behavior. You don't just feel stronger, you unequivocally become stronger in the eyes of others. People instinctively begin to respect your personal space, more interrupting you less and asking for your opinion with greater care and deference because they simply don't know exactly where you stand. And this mystery, this profound sense of the unknown, inherently creates gravity. It draws people in not through overt charm or loud declarations, but through the quiet, compelling force of your stillness and unreadability. Machiavelli would have called this the art of concealment. It's not about hiding your entire self, retreating into the shadows like a recluse. It's about strategically concealing only the specific parts of yourself, the vulnerabilities that can be effectively used against you. He understood that every great empire, every powerful ruler, ultimately falls when the king becomes too familiar, too emotionally transparent, too visibly reactive. Therefore, he taught rulers to construct walls not of stone and mortar, but of carefully calibrated behavior. Walls built from deliberate pauses, from an unwavering posture, from profound patience. These walls aren't designed to push people out. Rather, they are constructed to meticulously control what others see when they attempt to come in. You don't smile too often or too readily. You don't laugh at everything, even jokes that aren't particularly funny. You don't impulsively jump to explain yourself when someone misunderstands you or misinterprets your words. Instead, you allow people to sit uncomfortably in the tension of their own confusion or misperception. And in that very tension, you subtly become dominant, not through aggression or argument, but through an imposing stillness. You become untouchable, not because you fight harder or louder, but because you simply leave nothing to strike no obvious target for attack. And that is the unmistakable mark of someone truly dangerous. Not the one who lurks in the shadows, but the one who stands confidently in plain sight, utterly exposed to observation, yet reveals absolutely nothing of substance. Once you systematically strip away these three critical emotional leaks, eagerness, conflicted admiration, and anticipatory doubt, something truly strange and transformative begins to happen. The world starts treating you fundamentally differently, not because you've become louder or more aggressive or more outwardly impressive, but because you've become unreadable. And unreadability, as Machiavelli keenly observed, is terrifying to the weak, but profoundly seductive to the powerful. You walk into a room, and no one can quite place you. Are you impressed by their status? Are you secretly threatened by their presence? Are you even remotely interested in what they're saying? They simply don't know. And because they don't know, they instinctively adjust. They try harder. They reveal more of themselves, often just to elicit any reaction from you. And in that subtle, yet profound dynamic reversal, you shift from being the one on trial, the one being assessed, to the one who is unequivocally in control. That was Machiavelli's ultimate goal, a mind that could not be cracked, even under immense pressure, a presence that could not be manipulated, even by those who seemingly held all the leverage. In a world teeming with emotionally transparent people, desperate to connect, to explain, to be understood, the one who meticulously withholds becomes an unyielding fortress. Not cold, not heartless, but utterly undecipherable. That is precisely what makes people uneasy. That is precisely what compels them to respect you often without fully understanding why. Strategic revelation, the power of intentionality. Now, it's crucial to understand that this approach doesn't mean you become a literal robot devoid of all human emotion. It doesn't mean you kill your empathy or sever your ability to genuinely connect with others. What it does mean is that you choose with absolute intention when to reveal and when to withhold. You transition from automatic impulsive emotional expression to a regime of strategic revelation. Every single word you utter, every subtle expression becomes a deliberate decision, a calculated signal, a nuanced power play. Someone offers you lavish praise. You respond with a single measured nod, not because you're dismissive or ungrateful, but because you understand you don't need external validation to confirm your worth. Someone attempts to insult you. You don't immediately defend yourself or retaliate. Instead, you allow them to awkwardly fill the silence, to stumble over their own words as they try to explain or justify their aggression. The more they speak, the more insecure and exposed they become. Someone brags incessantly in your presence, you maintain a profound stillness. That very stillness, that quiet composure, punctures their performance far more deeply than any verbal comment ever could. Because the moment you consciously remove the reflex to prove yourself or to react impulsively, you become truly immune to manipulation. And that immunity, that unshakable core, radiates outward a palpable force. People sense it. They realize they can't easily pull you into their emotional frame. They can't bait you into a reaction. They can't pin you down. So instead, they find themselves orbiting around you, drawn by a mysterious force, not out of fear, but because your silence compels them to reflect on their own behavior. Machiavelli would tell you that this is where power becomes self sustaining. You no longer chase control, you effortlessly attract it. You no longer need to overtly expose your strength. Your disciplined restraint becomes the irrefutable proof of it. And most importantly, you no longer provide others with the blueprint to break you. That's what these three emotions are: blueprints. Eagerness tells them precisely where you're desperate. Conflicted admiration reveals exactly where you're insecure. Anticipatory doubt instructs them precisely where to apply pressure. But if you meticulously remove those signals, there's no crack for them to enter, no seam for them to pull at. You are still profoundly human, still experiencing emotions, still feeling the full spectrum of the human condition. But no one observing you can possibly discern what direction to push because absolutely nothing leaks. And that he knew makes you unnerving. Unnerving is good. It means people tread carefully. They plan their interactions more meticulously. They choose their words with you with greater precision. And in that cautious, respectful space, you gain invaluable time. Time to observe, time to assess, time to decide who genuinely deserves access to your inner world and who absolutely does not. Because once your mind becomes truly impenetrable, you begin to see with startling clarity who is attempting to enter it, not physically, not overtly, but psychologically. Through flattery, through competition, through subtle emotional baiting, through passive aggression. All the insidious tactics people employ to shift your emotional state. But they don't work because there's simply nothing for them to latch onto. You remain focused, dry, unreadable. You don't explain your ambitions. You don't justify your detachment. You don't share your opinions until you have thoroughly read the room and assessed the landscape. And when you finally do speak, your words are sharp, final, and precisely measured. You don't speak to explore an idea, you speak to direct. Machiavelli would famously say, "He who reveals his mind too easily becomes ruled by those who understand it better than he does." And that tragically is the fate of most people. They mistakenly believe that sharing everything makes them appear honest, noble, transparent, or relatable, but in reality, it only makes them acutely vulnerable to interpretation, to manipulation, to being defined by external forces. The more you give away emotionally, the more room others have to define your value, to project their own motives onto you, to establish your limits. But when you give them nothing, absolutely nothing to work with, they are compelled to rely solely on your actions. And actions, unlike fluid emotions, can be meticulously shaped, controlled, and strategically deployed. This is precisely why individuals with true power never feel compelled to explain their emotional state. They don't announce, "I'm feeling a bit off today." They don't declare, "I'm nervous about this." They don't sigh loudly hoping someone will notice their distress. That's low level exposure. That's emotional charity, and it invariably costs far more than it ever gives. Instead, they operate under tension as if it were simply oxygen, a natural state. Their face remains unchanged. Their pace doesn't falter. Their posture doesn't fold or betray weakness. That kind of unwavering consistency is profoundly intimidating because it is exceptionally rare, and rarity in any context immediately creates status. If you aspire to rise, become rare. If you desire to dominate, become unreadable. If you crave an impenetrable mind, then start here. Stop leaking signals to people who haven't earned the right to read you. The culmination: internal sovereignty and unwavering presence. Once you have successfully silenced the leaks and weaponized your restraint, something even deeper and more profound begins to set in. It's no longer just about power over others. It's about cultivating an undeniable power over yourself. And this Machiavelli knew was the ultimate level, the true aim. Not merely external dominance, but profound internal sovereignty. The brutal truth is that most people are enslaved by their own emotional reflexes, not by brute force, not by overt threats, but by ingrained habits. They feel an emotion, so they immediately express it. They want something, so they impulsively pursue it. They doubt themselves, so they reflexively hesitate. And in every single instance, they broadcast the exact pattern that can be used ruthlessly against them. But you are no longer that person. Now, before your mouth even opens, your mind meticulously calculates. Before your face instinctively reacts, your cultivated discipline steps in taking control. You no longer speak from raw impulse, you speak from a carefully chosen position. And when people notice that when they realize they can't accurately predict what will move you, what will impress you, or what will provoke you, they instinctively elevate you in their own minds. Because unpredictability in the human social hierarchy triggers respect and often fear. The less someone can read you, the more powerful they implicitly assume you are. And here's the crucial catch: they're right. Because when you stop bleeding emotions into every single interaction, you immediately start conserving power. And power, when consistently conserved, compounds exponentially. Your words gain weight. Your presence gains an undeniable sharpness. People begin preparing more thoroughly before they even speak to you, not because you're cruel or overtly threatening, but because you've meticulously trained them to respect your silence, to respect the power of the unsaid. You've trained them to approach you with clear intent, not with emotional noise or casual banter. This is how true influence works, not by being the loudest, but by being the hardest to move the most unyielding. And it's here where Machiavelli's true genius reveals itself. He didn't advocate for coldness or emotional detachment for its own sake. He advocated for profound strategy. He knew that the emotionally transparent are infinitely easier to control, to manipulate. So the goal wasn't to kill emotion altogether, but to meticulously contain it, to refine it, to delay its outward expression long enough to weaponize it only when it genuinely matters, when it serves a strategic purpose. You still feel eagerness, but you don't allow it to show. You still feel admiration, but you don't permit it to warp into corrosive comparison. You still feel doubt, but you don't project it into the world before it has been thoroughly tested and resolved internally. This is the very core of the impenetrable mind you feel deeply, profoundly, but you leak absolutely nothing. And now the world cannot calculate you. Let them try. Let them meticulously analyze every pause you take, every glance you withhold, every nod you delay. The more they fruitlessly attempt to decode you, the more uncertain they become. And uncertainty inevitably breeds hesitation. That is your undeniable advantage. While they hesitate, you decide. While they guess, you act. While they exhaust themselves trying to figure you out, you're already 3 steps ahead making decisive moves they didn't even see coming. That's how profound power is quietly built in the void between your raw emotion and your controlled expression. You begin to realize that your silence is often louder, more impactful than most people's noise, that your steadfast refusal to be provoked is far more intimidating than any overt display of strength or aggression, and that the most truly dangerous person in any room is never the one shouting the loudest. It's the one who can stand calmly in the midst of fire and not blink. This is the behavior of rulers, of master tacticians, of those who don't merely survive the game, but who profoundly bend its very rules to their will. The cost and the reward, an unyielding fortress. But let's be brutally clear, this way of being, this path to an impenetrable mind comes with a significant cost. You will lose people. You will lose those who demand instant, unfiltered access to your every thought and feeling. You will lose those who require constant emotional confirmation, incessant reassurance, and easy, effortless connection. They'll label you as distant, perhaps cold, maybe even arrogant. Let them. Let them affix labels to that which they cannot reach, to that which they cannot comprehend. Because connection built upon your constant emotional exposure isn't genuine connection. It's a form of emotional consumption. And people who only truly understand you when you bleed your vulnerabilities are not your allies. They are, in essence, emotional addicts. You do not exist to feed other people's emotional appetites. You exist to build something meaningful, to achieve something significant. And building takes immense energy. Building demands unwavering focus, and building crucially requires silence. So you build without explaining. You ascend without performing for an audience. You systematically eliminate emotional signals, not to become empty or heartless, but to become incredibly precise, incredibly sharp in your actions and presence. And soon, those who once demanded your openness will either fall away, unable to cope with your containment, or they will evolve, learning to respect your boundaries. They will learn to appreciate your disciplined reserve, or they will inevitably be replaced by people who instinctively do. Because this kind of mind, this impenetrable presence, doesn't attract everyone. In fact, it repels most. And that, Machiavelli would argue, is precisely the point. An impenetrable mind isn't necessarily loved by many. It is, however, profoundly respected by the discerning few. And respect, unlike fleeting attention, endures. There's a moment, a profound shift, after you've truly mastered the silence, when people begin to look at you differently, not just with casual curiosity, but with a palpable caution. They can't place you, they can't accurately map your inner world, your emotional landscape. And that very uncertainty transforms you into a mirror, a stark reflection that unforgivingly shows them their own insecurities, their own emotional leaks. You haven't said a word, you haven't directly challenged them, but your unreadability forces them to confront what they are revealing, what they are broadcasting, and they often resent it. This is where true psychological gravity is born, because now your presence no longer merely demands attention, it commands it compellingly, not through noise, not through overt charisma, but through the profound, unsettling absence of emotional permission. You don't invite people into your inner world, you make them earn entry, and in doing so, you completely flip the dynamic. They now want your approval. They crave your reaction. They desire access to your true thoughts. And that very desire bends them. It makes them cautious, selective, incredibly careful in their interactions with you. That is power. And Machiavelli would tell you that power doesn't ultimately come from being liked. It comes from being considered dangerous. Dangerous in this context doesn't mean aggressive. It doesn't mean cruel. It means unreadable, calculated, and absolutely unflinching. And when someone attempts to gauge you, to provoke you to guilt trip you, and nothing lands, nothing resonates, they begin to recalibrate their entire approach around your formidable presence. You have become a force, not merely a person, and forces, unlike individuals, are not argued with, they are adapted to. The three emotions you've meticulously cut off, eagerness, conflicted admiration, and anticipatory doubt, were never the problem themselves. The inherent problem lay in their timing, in their transparency. You were unwittingly handing people the keys to manipulate you. And now you don't even show them the door. This profound shift, this internal transformation, doesn't just change how others treat you. It fundamentally changes how you treat yourself. You begin to see with crystalline clarity how often you used to betray your own inherent strength just by over explaining, by over apologizing, by overreacting, by desperately trying to be relatable instead of untouchable, by striving to be included instead of being remembered. That version of you is gone now. Now you move with deliberate restraint. You understand that your presence itself is your ultimate leverage, and every single word, every fleeting expression, every subtle signal is either sharpening that leverage or dulling it. So you choose to sharpen. You don't rush to fill silences anymore. You don't soften your innate intensity to be more digestible for others. You don't dilute your profound discipline to make others comfortable. You embody the unyielding stillness of a person who does not need to be understood, but only and unequivocally respected. That's the edge. And it makes people profoundly nervous. They'll search your face for clues. They'll push just a little, hoping you'll flinch, hoping to find a weakness. They'll talk more often incessantly when you say less. Why? Because they're desperately trying to gain the upper hand, to find an opening. And every second you remain still, utterly composed, they realize with dawning unease that they don't have it. This is where you become truly dangerous, not in a malicious sense, but in a strategic one, because you're no longer playing the emotional game, the game of impulsive reactions and visible tells. You're playing the energy game, and your energy is no longer a faucet they can easily turn on with praise or shut off with rejection. It's fixed, unyielding, unchanging. It moves only on your terms. That's what makes you impenetrable. But make no mistake, people will test you, especially when they can't read you. They'll throw bait, hoping you'll instinctively chase it. They'll pretend to open up, hoping you'll mirror their vulnerability and overshare. They'll attempt to guilt you, to flatter you, to provoke you not to genuinely connect, but to meticulously break your frame, to destabilize your composure. Don't give them what they're looking for. Let the bait rot. Let the silence stretch into uncomfortable lengths. Let the tension grow until it breaks them, not you. Because when someone tries to test your edge and finds none when they push and encounter an unyielding wall, they begin to believe you have no limit. That is power, not brute strength, not loud declarations, but the quiet, slow erosion of their confidence in controlling you. And once they lose that belief, they obey. Not necessarily out of fear, but out of a profound earned respect. Because now they know you don't need them. You don't need their approval, their applause, or even their understanding. You've built something far stronger, far more enduring than superficial charm. You've built an unshakable presence. When the last piece clicks into place, when your emotions are no longer visibly broadcast, when your energy cannot be swayed, and your silence becomes sharper, more impactful than any quick response you cross a critical threshold. You stop being perceived as just another person in the room. You become a tangible presence, something people feel before you even speak something they can't quite define, but instinctively respect or fear, or perhaps both in equal measure. This is the final level of Machiavelli's game, not just to understand power, but to utterly embody it, because an impenetrable mind doesn't need to declare itself. It doesn't demand respect. It simply creates an atmosphere where disrespect simply doesn't occur. People don't even think to challenge you, not because you're overtly threatening, but because you are unreadable. And what cannot be read, what cannot be predicted, simply cannot be controlled. This is where true dominance begins. You become the one who others adjust for, the one whose opinion is sought, but never begged for, the one whose validation is valued precisely because it's never given away cheaply. People talk carefully around you. They phrase things with greater thought, more precision. They ask questions more precisely, not because you overtly intimidate them, but because your profound calm forces them into a heightened state of awareness. And awareness in this context is a subtle kind of submission. Machiavelli knew that most rulers fall not by the sword, but by the mirror. They expose too much. They speak too freely. They react too quickly. And in doing so, they inadvertently arm their enemies with the very weapons that will ultimately undo them. But you give nothing. Not your doubt, not your desperation, not your hidden envy. You've meticulously sealed those doors. And what remains is a profound stillness, a fortress of self that cannot be pierced.